This is Algebra Lesson 8-5, factoring trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. Now, before we start this lesson, it's probably a good idea to review some things that are going to be necessary to use during this lesson, and that is being able to factor a number. So let's take a look at the factors of each number. If I said, please list the factors of 24, the easiest way to do that would be to think of all the numbers that divide into 24 evenly, starting with the smallest number. For example, I know that 1 times 24 is 24. 2 times 12, 12, not 13. 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. I know that 5 doesn't go into it, and then I'm back to 6, so I know I've hit all my factors. So my factors of 24 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 24. That's the easiest way to find the factors. That way you won't miss any. If you go systematically through the factors. So the factors of 12, 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. And when you get two numbers that are very close to each other, you're probably done factoring. And I know 3 times 4 is the closest they can get. So my factors of 12 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. Factors of 54. Oh, 1 times 54. 54 is even, so I know it's divisible by 2. And that's 2 times 27. 5 plus 4 is 9, so I know it's divisible by 3. That's 3 times 18. 54 is not divisible by 4. It's divisible by 2 and 3, so I know it's divisible by 6. 6 times 9 is 54. 6 and 9 are close together. I know that 7 and 8 don't divide into 54, so I know I am done. So my factors of 54 are 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 18, 27, and 54. And last but not least, we'll do the factors of 15. 15, 1 times 15, 2 doesn't divide into it, 3 times 5, and I'm done. So 1, 3, 5, and 15. Now the reason I did this is because we're going to learn how to factor a trinomial. Okay? In earlier courses, you learned how to find factors of whole numbers like 15, like we just did. You can also find the factors of some trinomials. To factor trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c, you want to do two things. The first thing you want to do is find two numbers whose product, which means when you multiply them together, their product is c, or the constant term, and whose sum, when you add them together, is the coefficient of the b. So let's take a look at a couple of trinomials. If we're going to factor x squared plus 8x plus 12, we need a product of my constant term, which means I need the product of 12, and I need a sum of whatever b is, and b is right here. So I need a sum of 8. So I need two numbers that multiply together to get 12 and add together to get 8. I know that all my factors have to be positive because I don't have any negative signs throughout my problem. Therefore, I'm going to only focus on positive numbers. I'm going to start systematically, even though I know the answer to this, and some of you might know the answer to this, but some other people may not. So I'm going to start very systematically on how you would do this if you had no idea how to do this. So I'm going to say, okay, 1 times 12. 1 times 12 is 12, but 1 plus 12 is 13. That's not 8. Okay, 2 times 6 is 12. 2 plus 6 is 8. That's what I need. Now that I know what I need, all I have to do is pay attention to my first term. My first term here is x squared. You divide it evenly. You divide x squared. If it was x to the 6th, you divide 6 by 2, and you get x to the 3rd and x to the 3rd. Since it's x squared, I'm going to divide it by 2, and I'm going to get an x and another x. And then I'm just simply going to put these numbers in. Since they're both positive, it's going to be plus 2 and plus 6, or it could be plus 6 and plus 2. It really doesn't matter which way you put the numbers inside the parentheses. The parentheses can be backwards. It's the sign that's important, and since everything's positive, we don't have to worry about it. Now we can check this by multiplying it back together. If I multiplied this back together, okay, x times x plus 6 plus 2 times x plus 6, Better get me back to my original problem. I have x squared plus 6x plus 2x plus 12, which is x squared plus 8x plus 12, which was my original problem, so therefore I know I have to be right. Let's take a look at problem number 2. Problem number 2, I need a product of 30 with a sum of 13. Two numbers who multiply together to get 30, add together to get 13. Well, 1 times 30, but 1 plus 30 is 31. I know everything's positive again because I don't have any negative signs inside my trinomial. 2 times 15, ooh, that's close, because 2 plus 15 is 17. We're getting closer. Let's see. 3 times 10. 3 plus 10 is 30, but 3 times 10 is 30, 3 plus 10 is 13. That's what works. So I break my A into two pieces, an A and an A, and I do plus 3 and plus 10. And I have factored that trinomial. So as you can clearly see, if you know your multiplication tables, you can probably do factoring fairly quickly, at least in this form. Now we have to start paying attention to signs, because if we look at this next problem, we have x squared minus 10x plus 16, which means I need a product of positive 16, but a sum of negative 10. Okay. The only way I can get a positive product and a negative sum is now both of my factors have to be negative, because a negative times a negative is a positive, and a negative plus a negative stays negative. Okay, so now I know that both of my factors have to be negative. So I have negative 1 times negative 16. That equals negative 1 plus negative 16 equals negative 17. I'm going to rewrite that nicer. Negative 1 plus negative 16 equals negative 17. I have negative 2 times negative 8. Negative 2 plus negative 8 is negative 10. There we go. I found it right off the bat here. So I have x minus 2 times x minus 8, or x minus 8 times x minus 2. It doesn't matter which order the parentheses are, because they're both minus signs, and they both have negative signs in them. Look at number 4, q squared minus 15q plus 36. Again, we have a product that is positive and a sum that is negative. So we have a product of positive 36 and a sum of negative 15. So both of my terms must be negative. That's the only way you can get a positive product. Two negatives multiply together to give me a positive. Negative 1 times negative 36. Negative 1 plus negative 36 is negative 37. That doesn't work. Negative 2 times negative 18. Negative 2 plus negative 18 is negative 20. That doesn't work. Negative 3 times negative 12. Negative 3 plus negative 12 is negative 15. There we go. I've got my numbers. So I look at my first term. It's a q squared. So I have q and q. And I will have a minus 3 and a minus 12, or a minus 12 and a minus 3. Okay. Now let's take a look and see what happens when our product is negative and our sum is positive. That's what we have in number 5. We have a product of negative 48 and a sum of positive 13. So let's think about that. If we have a product that's negative and a sum that's positive, we have one negative number and one positive number. Out of the factors, the positive number needs to be the larger of the two factors, otherwise we can't get a positive sum. So I know if I was going to do 1 and 48, 1 would have to be negative and 48 would have to be positive, which I'm actually going to do even though I know that's not the actual right answer. But it's good to go through them systematically, because if you don't, you're most likely going to miss the one that actually works. If you start hunting and pecking and trying to guess, I'm going to guess the 12, then I'm going to guess 9, then I'm going to guess 3, then I'm going to guess 18, you're going to miss the one that actually works. So it's best to go through it systematically. Negative 1 times 48 is negative 48, but negative 1 plus 48 is 47. Negative 2 times positive 24. Negative 2 plus 24 is 22. Getting closer, but not quite there. 8 and 4 is 12, so it does divide by 3. So negative 3 times 16. So negative 3 plus 16 is positive 13. There we go. I got my numbers right there. So I'm going to have my x and x. And I'm going to have a negative 3 and a positive 16. I can't have a negative 16 and a positive 3, but I could reverse the parentheses. I could have x plus 16 times x minus 3, but the 3 has to be negative and the 16 has to be positive because that's the only possible way you'll get a positive 13 as your sum. Let's look at number 6 here. Number 6, if we have a negative product is negative 24. And our sum is also negative, negative 5, which means of the two factors, one has to be negative and one has to be positive. And since my sum is negative, the larger of the two factors has to be the negative factor. Right? It's just the only way you can, if you think about it logically, you can eliminate half the number of factors you're going to choose because you can think about what your sum should be. So since my sum has negative 5 and my larger factor has to be negative, I could do 1 times negative 24. 1 plus negative 24 is negative 23. 2 times negative 12. 2 plus negative 12 is negative 10. 3 times negative 8. 3 plus negative 8 is negative 5. There we go. I found it right there. So since my first term is an n squared, so I'll have n and n. I have a positive 3 and a negative 8. And that's the factorization of n squared minus 5n minus 24. Now, you can factor some trinomials that have more than one variable. For example, consider the product p plus 9q times p plus 7q. When we multiply that out, we would get a p squared plus 16pq plus 63q squared. This suggests that a trinomial with two variables must be factorable if the first term includes the square of one variable, the middle term includes both variables, and the last term includes the square of the other variable. So the only difference now is we have to pay attention to our variables. Okay, we're still doing product sum the exact same way. We're just treating our variables slightly differently. So let's take a look at this. Let's factor d squared plus 17dg minus 60g squared. So I need a product of negative 60 with a sum of 17. So one factor has to be negative, one factor has to be positive, and the larger factor has to be my positive factor. So negative 1 times 60, negative 1 plus 60 is 59. Negative 2 times 30, negative 2 plus 30 is 28. Negative 3 times 20, negative 3 plus 20 is positive 17. So there we go. I've got my factors. So now I need to pay attention to both the d and the g. Since they're both squared, in my parentheses, I'll have a d at the beginning and a g at the end of both of those parentheses. Now I just stick the numbers in that I had before. So it's going to be d minus 3g and d plus 20g. Simple as that. All you have to do is make sure you add your variables into your numbers. So we don't change anything except for we have to look at our variables. Let's look at number 8 here. I need a product of negative 10 and a sum of negative 3, which means the larger of my two factors needs to be negative. So 1 times negative 10, that's negative 9 when we add it. 2 times negative 5, 2 plus negative 5 equals negative 3. There we go. I found it. It's that one right there. So I have a u at the beginning, and I have a v at the end, and I have plus 2v and minus 5v. So u plus 2v, u minus 5v. And again, you can check all of these by multiplying them back together and making sure you get to the beginning, you get to your original problem. Number 9, I need a product of 24 with a sum of 11. Everything is positive, so all my factors should be positive. Okay. Hopefully by now you can start eliminating things like I know 1 and 24 is not going to work and 2 and 12 is not going to work. Okay. I'm thinking 3 times 8, because 3 times 8 is 24. 3 plus 8 equals 11. So there we go. So I'm going to have x plus 3y, because I have to have a y at the end, times x plus 8y. And I am done. 8y and 3y is 11y, so that makes my middle term, and I'm good. Number 10, I need a product of negative 48 and a sum of 2, which means my larger of the two factors has to be the positive factor. And the factors should be fairly close together. Okay, since the larger of my two factors has to be, I know that my factors have to be close together because my sum is small. If my sum was big, my factors would have to be further apart. But since my sum is small, my factors need to be closer together. So I'm thinking negative 6 times 8, because negative 6 plus 8 is equal to 2. And there I've got it. So I've got v minus 6w times v plus 8w. And I have factored that problem. The last thing we can do is we can also apply this. If I give you a word problem, you should still be able to apply factoring to be able to solve it. The area of a picture frame is given by the trinomial x squared plus 6x minus 16. The length of the frame is x plus 8. What is the width of the frame? Well, I'm going to take my picture frame, which is x squared plus 6x minus 16, and I'm simply going to factor it. So I need a product of negative 16 with a sum of 6. Okay, if my product is negative, my sum is positive, the larger of my two factors has to be the positive factor. Since I know 8 has got to be one of the factors because they told me that, I'm thinking of a negative 2 times 8, because negative 2 plus 8 is positive 6. So I'm going to have x minus 2 times x plus 8. That works, and we already had x plus 8 being the length, so the width of this frame has to be x minus 2. And there we have it. That is factoring trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. So our closure question for today. How do you determine the appropriate pair of factors to use when you factor the trinomial of the form x squared plus bx plus c equals 0? Now, I walked you through this at least 10 times. So you should be able to explain to me in your own words how you would find the appropriate factors.